Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast, with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
Well, welcome everyone to another Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Detzel, and I have a super special guest, Selfo. Annie, how are you?
Very good. Hi, Chris.
Nice to meet you. And this is the first time we've actually had a conversation ever.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm
so
nervous.
You guys are going to see the warm-up happening in real time. Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm really excited to be here with you today and to go a little bit deeper into community together.
Yeah, me too. And, I think when we were doing I call it the pre-show, kind of getting to know you a little bit, and you kept going on and on about this amazing stuff that you're about your life and how you got into community. And I was like, okay, let's stop there because I want everybody to know about this because this is really interesting. And before I do though, do you like beer or anything like that? Is that not a thing?
I'm more of a wine or cocktail lady, so
that's okay. That's all right. Beer, wine, cocktails. I've been drinking less beer as of late and been trying different cocktails, but I'm also doing some kind, some whiskey type, but tasting and buying some whiskeys and things like that, like scotch and whatnot. So
very manly of you, Chris.
I know. That's what I thought. I thought maybe I can be a little bit more manly and try the scotch stuff. It's not so bad, So, well, hey, why don't we get started? And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where you're from, how you got to be into the community atmosphere and all that stuff. Would love to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So, my name is Annie. I'm currently serving as the head of community at Mindvalley. I have been in Mindvalley for over 6 years now, and in this role for about 4 years. So it's been quite interesting to see the evolution of community, even just in the past 5 years or so. There's been tremendous change in the industry. But about myself, something that I really like to start with is that I'm the daughter of migrants. I'm Italian. However, my family is from Albania. So I was born in Albania. And then we moved to Italy when I was 1.5 years. And that's where what I was sharing with you earlier, that was my first probably moment where I understood the power of community, because I was taken away from everything that was my familiar network and put into a reality that didn't want us. We were the unwanted migrants. And that was the majority of my life since I was 19. And this is quite interesting because I was very, very much into the theme of belonging because of this personal journey of mine, and something that really allowed me to learn how to navigate social dynamics was understanding how to fit in a place that doesn't want you. So at age 19, with this journey of mine, I wanted to change the world. I found it quite an unfair place. So I moved to London. Oh, wow. I moved to London because, as I said, I had to face the fact that if I wanted to go down this international relations path, which is what I wanted to do in Italy, being a foreigner in a place like Italy wasn't going to be helping me in my career. So I wanted to move somewhere that felt a little bit more meritocratic. That's how I ended up in London, where nobody cared where I was from, which was extremely refreshing to me.
Yeah.
And at the last year of my university, I was joining a competition called Your Big Year, and the prize for that was super cool. So we were looking to select one person that would represent our generation and travel the world for free for 1 year working in social entrepreneurship projects.
Wow.
I was like, okay, I am in. Whatever I have to do, I am in.
I'll take it. Wow.
And it was created by an organization called World Merit. Very cool concept, the idea of bringing more of meritocracy inside of education instead of where you come from, which was super aligned with my path, as I just shared.
Yeah.
And I that was the first time I actually found out what it even meant to be inside of an online community, even though that was not really the name back then.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to explain people what that was about, the closest thing was a forum, but there was no such conception as online communities. We're talking almost 10 years ago now. Yeah. Anyhow, I go through the competition. I start falling in love with the network. Young people from all over the world, they were writing books, starting organizations, and I felt so inspired. And that was the first time I really understood how important it is to be surrounded really by examples and stories that inspire you to transformation. And I fell so much in love with the organization that I actually dropped out from the competition. And I gave up the dream of traveling the world because I was offered a job to actually manage that network.
Nice.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome.
So that's how my journey into community started. And then from there, love brought me to Brazil, where I actually lived for 3 years. Wow. And yes, and that was a completely different journey into community because I worked much more into the offline world. So alternative educational projects and co-working spaces. And then I bumped into Mindvalley, and that's where I moved to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, where I lived for 3 years. Really went deep.
You've been all over the place.
Yes, I've been everywhere.
Wow.
Yes, and from there, loved, like, again, completely different reintegration process. All of my life has been about rebuilding really community wherever I would go. And now I'm in Tallinn, Estonia, which is currently my base. So I'm back to Europe after a long decade in other continents.
I love it. It's just so much. You've just been so many places and had to rebuild your life in a sense, and all these different places, built community and those kinds of things. And then now you've been at this one company for a while now, and been kind of the same role. Very fascinating. It was. So I'm curious, how many languages can you speak?
4.
4 languages. What are they?
Yes. Italian, Portuguese, Albanian, and English.
I love it. So I'll tell you a little story because I just think it's so interesting. Is my so the co-founder. So I'm one of the co-founders of Peers Over Beers, and the other person that was the co-founder, his name was Michael Sandoval. And whenever we started this, we just were doing it as 2 friends. We'd just get together and have beers, literally, and just talk about all things community. I just wanted to be close to him because he was a good friend when I left the company that we were working for, and he knew 4 or 5 languages. One was Spanish. He's he's from El Paso, and 2 was English, 3 was Portuguese, 4 was German, and then I think he was working on some other languages. And it was very important to him, to do that. And what I found is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but anyone from Europe, or it seems like outside of the US for the most part, knows 2, 3, 4, 5 languages. When you're in the US, you might, depending, but if you're an American, you might know 1. Barely, so.
I would say, unless you were born in the UK, wherever else you are in Europe, you're kind of forced to at least go bilingual. So
yes. No, I think it's great because just think about all the things that you understand, the cultures that you can really there's very much of a positive to it. I'm sure it's extremely difficult. I don't know, but so I think that's great. I love it. That's why I asked the question is I'm just in awe of folks that know several languages and things like that. So
it's interesting because I actually can only handle 3 languages at the same time, and kind of like the 4th, I could go between conversations in those 3 languages, but if you mix in the 4th, that's my limit. And then I really need to make a massive mental effort to kind of take out the box of the 4th language.
That's so interesting.
So it's quite interesting to see what happens to the brain when it comes to languages.
So something else, and I know we're a little off, but I think it's okay, is so one time I worked at this company called CompUSA, and there's this company got bought by a Mexican company, and so these guys came over from Mexico, and I was in the elevator just listening to one of the owners or the guy that bought it, and somebody asked him, so there's somebody was asking him about the languages, and he goes, last night was the first time I dreamed in English, dreamed something in English, and it was just, he goes, it was like I woke up and was like, what? Oh my gosh. So, I guess that's whenever it's also kind of natural, is when you start dreaming, in that language.
Or when you start seeing, say you bumped into a corner and really hurt yourself, which language do you swear into?
Or that. I like that. That's oh shit. I mean, or whatever else you might say.
Exactly. So, that's a nice indication.
I love it. To bring this back around, I'm the worst at bringing them back around, so feel free to always bring it back around too. But so at the current company that you're at, can you tell us a little bit about, maybe the company, but more so about the community and how you're building it and what you're thinking about?
Oh, yes. Cool. Mindvalley, it's truly, our promise is for our students to be able to awaken their greatness. So it started with the intention of bringing to the world everything that school doesn't teach you, which I find personally very fascinating. Like, for example, we have a course on how to divorce, or better, how to uncouple consciously.
Wow.
So things that nobody ever tells you, this is how you deal with it, this is how you become a better parent. This is how you let go of a relationship that no longer works. This is how you start your business. Of course, we have more traditional stuff. This is how you tap into your intuition. So it's a very powerful place to be in, because one of our main values is transformation. And here is where the community part starts getting interesting. When it comes to your personal transformation, that tends to be quite a lonely journey. Yeah. I mean, it's you and your reflections. And oftentimes, what I've noticed, the most common question that we get inside of Mindvalley, probably to me, whenever we do a Q&A with our founder Vision, is always one of the top questions. People always ask what to do when your family or partner is not in the same path of personal journey as you are. So for someone who has decided to look at the mirror and say, okay, I am no longer okay with the person or the behaviors that I'm showcasing in my daily life, and I want to change, finding other people with whom you can actually share even the vocabulary of that transformation, because that becomes really tricky. You start literally communicating in a different language. You need someone who is in it for you. That's really the core of the community in Mindvalley, because it tends to be a very lonely journey. And even though we've come to great advancement when it comes to our understanding of mental health and promotion of mental health at work, it's still, in many cultures, in many places, it still feels even taboo for people to say, this is what I'm doing right now, or this is what I'm focusing on. So that's, I would say, the core of the community. And what I really love is that we do that, but when this healing space, let's call it, or like personal transformation space, sometimes can get really heavy. People are like down the trauma spiral. And what I really love about Mindvalley is that we do all of these while having a lot of fun. So we're very famous for our costume parties. You really need to check out our festival called A-Fest, Awesomeness Fest. And we throw amazing parties all around the world. So it's this combination of transformation and fun that had the community really come together. So specifically when we were hosting events, that's when we saw the strongest bonds happen. People naturally, you're sharing an experience. There's tons of research on this. You're sharing an experience that deeply transforms you. It is designed to provoke transformation in you. It's not just knowledge sharing. That's the difference between learning. You just like write down the bullet points, but transformation, you come out a different individual, right? So sharing that and making it memorable with fun elements in it, challenges in it. Even just coming up with the costume is a challenge on its own. You know what I mean? For our themed nights. That's
so. Annie, I want to back up.
Happening.
I want to get a little bit more because this is fascinating to me. Like, so, one is when you go through a transformation like that, you got to think about all the emotions, that go on in somebody's mind and heart and everything else. And like you said, it can be lonely, and you kind of bringing those people together to make it not so lonely. But uh, I'm interested in the events piece. You mentioned you do events, costume parties, all kinds of crazy, awesome things, and I love it. And but because I do think that that's where people bond face to face in these events and start, and I think there's something there, and a lot of companies are doing this. But I want to talk a little bit more about that. What one is. Let me think through this, because I think it's and you can just react to it. Is when I think of the events, where are you having these events? Are they consistent events like throughout the, in one place or in these different places? How do you manage those events? And then, what's, if you don't have to know, but if there's ROI, or how do you track it? How do you kind of think about, what's the value to the company to do these things and that kind of stuff, or to the community? Obviously, we know the value to the community because they're bonding, they're talking, and maybe they're talking about the company, because it's huge awareness kind of thing, and then they start becoming advocates and all that kind of stuff. But I said a lot of things. I don't know. I'm just very interested in the events piece, more specifically around, all that stuff that I just said. Where are you doing them? How are you doing them often in some of the same places and then different places? And how does that go, and how does that work?
So we tend to always change locations. That's part of the variety element, and also one of the ways in which we keep the community wanting to come back, because every time it's going to be a different experience. And we also, the location, how we choose the location is very intentional, depending on the event that we want to build. So the festival that I talked about has to be a jaw-dropping landscape. It has to be a tropical or, exotic location that you would want to go on a vacation, basically.
Sounds awesome.
But we also have another event. It is awesome. You absolutely have to come at some
Maybe
point.
I will.
There's this other event that we do, which is called Mindvalley University, which was one of the most challenging and also craziest ideas we've ever had. But from a purpose of community building, one of the craziest, most exciting experiments I've ever seen. So we do one event that lasts 3 weeks. Jeez. And there's a daily agenda from 10 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. happening every day, without obviously the weekends, because in the weekends we party. That's I told you that. And we have 3 parallel tracks happening. So we have a track for kids, a track for teenagers, and a track for adults. So the idea was, what if we could take a whole family to actually learn and transform together, instead of just going for a vacation where the parents are like lying and the kids hopefully have some activities to do, and nothing really truly outstanding comes of that in terms of memories, because everyone is kind of doing their own thing. And here, people imagine, last time that we did this experiment in Tallinn, Estonia, where I am right now, we had 1,000 people fly from all over the world and literally take over Tallinn for 3 weeks. Can you imagine what that does in terms of community building?
It's great.
And
I'm thinking about I'm thinking about like the back end stuff, like all the stuff that you have to do as a company to make that shit happen. Like
it's insane. It's insane logistically. Logistically, it's insane. However, in terms of ROI from these, I could tell you many things.
Ooh,
so
tell me.
I mean, obviously, from a company perspective, there's content that gets created.
Videos,
all of these speakers, all of these speakers, everything that then goes on YouTube, social media, that's number one.
Great.
Number 2 is authors, people that we would want to have in our platform as authors actually fall in love with what we are creating because of the community.
Yeah.
Because it's a community that has a very unique DNA to it. Everyone is so warm, open, and friendly, because everybody's so open to questioning where they are and changing, basically. So all of the authors say, oh my God, I feel like I've just walked into my family.
And it's just, you can have that relationship even with the authors, just asking questions. Hey, you don't mind if I put this on here? Oh no, go ahead. This is great. Oh my God. Such an emotional kind of lift that everybody wants to participate and be a part of, and fairly easy for an author, I'd assume, I mean, it's never
Yes.
easy, but but for me, I have a B2B community that, is focused in on this thing for organizations. It's good, but it's not so emotionally charged. You know what I mean? And it's not, well, let me tell you about my master data management project. Oh my gosh. Well, it's a bore in a way, not to say others don't want to listen to that, but it's not the same kind of emotionally charged and spiritually influenced kind of stuff that you're doing, which sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, and that becomes also a very big incentive for the community to come together, because imagine if you transform my life, Chris, and I took your course, and because of you I've redefined the relationship that I have with my own self, then I will be looking forward to meeting you and telling you this.
Yeah.
So for the community becomes a moment to finally meet people that have gone through the journey with them, people that have allowed them to transform. And on that perspective, again, in terms of business values, obviously we have retention being the biggest one that we want to look at.
Yeah.
Stickiness in the app, all of the things that kind of like the boring stuff that we would have to report on.
Yeah.
But in terms of how are our events impacting monthly active users, daily active users, can we draw any correlation between attendance in events and retention?
Yeah.
So I have to say we don't have all of the formulas down. So
it's hard. That's a hard one. So I don't think anybody
hard.
truly has it down, by the way. I mean,
thank you for letting me know. That's reassuring. I'm not the only one.
don't feel bad. But it's a struggle that, all community leaders have. Is it all depends on what your goals are. But, retention is a good one, but it's very hard to track, because, community can influence those things. I don't think that, and it feels like that something like what you have can influence it heavily, because people are sharing their experiences, people are and maybe that's everywhere, but still trying to prove it out, because there could be many factors, right? Like maybe they don't come back because maybe they ran out of money, or because these trips probably aren't that cheap, right? But no, seriously, like it's just like a company.
Yes,
1,000 things.
Investment.
Yeah, 1,000 things can happen, right? So to be an influence, and so I think you have to remember that is how community's going to be more influential over that stuff. And how do you prove it? And there's ways to prove it, right? Maybe get a data scientist or data person that really can help you push data in from your community over to, some BI, like Microsoft BI or Tableau or whatever, but just so you can kind of track it and look at it. And for the most part, I would love to say, when community members engage in the community, when they reply, when they like, when they speak, when they do certain things, they renew at higher rates. They don't just renew, they renew higher, and they buy more. And so the cross-sell, upsell stuff is there, opportunities there, and so maybe that's true, but can we prove it? And so that's a hard thing. The company has to invest in those really smart people to prove some of that out, and that's part of our jobs as community leaders, in my opinion, not to say it's all on us, but is to prove it,
Absolutely.
And it's
Absolutely. Hard. That is hard. And actually, that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing right now in this role, together with, we put together these events that are magical.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, for the festival I told you about, 89% of our attendees say that it has been one of the best experiences of their lives. So we are talking, when I say they're magical, I'm not just saying,
I believe it.
Yeah, it's not an overstatement. And how do you replicate that throughout the years? Because when the moment where we have to close events, it becomes very emotional for everyone in the community, because they've literally stepped into a reality that doesn't exist in their daily life. And this is where the opportunity and the challenge is right now for me and my team, is there any way in which we can recreate, even if it's just a fraction of that magic, all around the world? So I know I was reading the CMX industry report on community recently, and I think there's been 13% increase compared to last year to companies that are going to invest in community-led events. Seems to be one of the biggest trends for 2022. Definitely we're part of that. And with this very big question in mind. And on top of it, linked to what we were just talking about, okay, and how am I going to prove the value of that? So if I have 10 people that are going to go mastermind together, for example, then what? Then what for the company?
Yeah. I think that, I'm sure for your company, especially, there's been kind of a transformation with COVID and everything else, because people were so used to going to events like that to not going to events. Hopefully some of that changes. What have you been doing for the last 2 years, to kind of keep people engaged and involved, from a community standpoint?
Well, all of that was, we tried to translate it in the online. Yeah. Obviously, I think we have all found this out. It is not the same. It is not the same. However, it did open some interesting opportunities. For example, we never really knew how important it was for our customers that they actually spoke about their transformation in their own language. So I'll give you an example. Our Spanish market went insane when it came to online community events, because finally they didn't have the language barrier, and they felt like I can talk about what's going on in my life with someone else in my native language, and that feels incredible. Something else that we discovered was that we always gave a lot of importance to the authors, because obviously they are outstanding and they have so much to share. But what the community started loving is when they were put on the spotlight. So now that it was community-led, obviously they couldn't count anymore on all of these big names. So they started sharing each other's knowledge, wisdom, and bringing each other on stage, quote unquote, on the virtual stage. And that's what they really loved, because they started feeling seen and in the spotlight with what they had to bring to the game. Now, all of that, we are looking at how do we create a platform where we can enable community even more. So obviously, some of the trends, can we look at AI matching with what we're doing? Can we look at creating smaller groups where people choose themselves, as I said, based on language, based on the time zone that they are, so they don't have to wait for an event to meet each other. They can actually take the journey in a more facilitated way among themselves. And that was also one of the things that we learned throughout these years, was we took ourselves out of the picture more and more as community managers, and we let the community lead themselves through their own transformation. So
you just gave them the tools and things like that to do that.
Yeah. And our ambassador program, our super user program, has been the biggest pillar of my department since forever, basically, because it became impossible to be able to, because this community speaks about such emotional topics, they demand a level of witnessing of their transformation that it's impossible. We're talking, today we have over 80,000 members in our membership. You can't, unless the whole team becomes a community team, you just cannot deliver that. And that was one of the biggest investments.
So you don't have a choice but to be community led in a lot of ways, right? Like it's kind of a buzzword today, and I it's not that I don't disagree that community shouldn't be community led, but I mean, like when I look at companies like mine, is sometimes I know what the community needs in the beginning, and then you just let it grow to kind of then see how it forms, right? And I think that a lot of organizations, believe it or not, it's pretty much community led. Now, if you don't allow it, the way I see it is, if you don't have content that is relevant, that's engaging, that's helpful to them, then that's when you fail, right? And if you're not consistent at it, and if you're not listening to those users over time, then that's definitely not community led. But if you continue down the path of one is, and I love how you have a lot of members, and sounds like they're super engaged, and you're giving them the tools to be more community led as it gets bigger, and as times have changed a little bit, hopefully you can become a little bit more organized or event focused again, where it's face to face, but there's still going to be some of that, both virtual and which is kind of a good thing. Think about it. Like
Yes.
a lot of times when you go to these on-site events, it's hard to get those people into the online community space, and start talking to each other about those experiences. The last 2 years, like it or not, we're all forced to kind of think about things virtually in that way, and I think to me it's kind of good. I mean, it changed a lot of things. Like here in the US, like online groceries, that was thought about 10 years ago, but they just couldn't figure it out and do it. But now it's a thing. Like you can get everything online and do everything online. So, communities have been online for a long time, but how do you bring that offline to the online? And so it sounds like you guys did some of that. Anyways, this is fascinating. You can keep going if you have other stuff, because I'm just loving it.
Well, but I have to admit, Chris, so, we were talking, me and you, at the beginning in the pre-show, about this video you saw about where I was talking about the importance of activating hearts in community rather than platforms. And I absolutely stand to that still. And I have to complement that by saying that the biggest challenge I've had, once all of these hearts in our communities have been activated, when you don't have the proper platform that allows for these micro gatherings or choosing each other or combing through the community, so you really find your person in there, that was very tricky in the past 2 years, because that synchronicity that would happen in events where you just see each other and you're like, I feel you, Chris, like me and you really have to talk. Let's grab a beer.
Yeah.
Replicating that in the online world without, still did kind of, right?
Exactly.
That was quite tricky. So I'm looking forward this year to seeing more development on the tech side for Mindvalley, so we can get that synchronicity happening in the online world with the same, not with the same strength maybe, but with a similar pattern of what we see in our events.
Yeah, and I think I think the positive is hopefully COVID is kind of going away-ish. Maybe never goes away, but we just learn to live with it in some ways. And then you can do a little bit of blended, and obviously for you guys, those amazing events are going to be probably crucial, to get back going, I would think, just because it sounds like a lot of fun. Do you guys use a platform that allows you to do that, that's outside of Mindvalley, or is there something?
You mean for hybrid events, or?
Yeah. Do you use kind of something there to track different things and allow people to connect and all that kind of stuff?
We are currently looking at Bevy as our potential platform for that. It's probably going to be, to be honest, I found it an extraordinary platform that was built for community managers.
Yeah.
From my point of view, it's a dream come true. So let's see. Now that we're going to kick off the offline strategy with these mini gatherings around the world, community led, then we will definitely be looking at, okay, how can we optimize this technology wise and make it easier for our community to advertise their own events? And Bevy ticked all the boxes in that sense. But the majority of our tech is built in-house.
Okay.
Yes, because it's built around our own app and the content.
Yeah.
So that's also what has made it a little bit slower in terms of development, because the integration with the existing infrastructure system is it's
always
quite
difficult.
Well,
anytime you have, you build your own, one is when you have your own product, for example, and people use it somehow, some way, integrating that into a third-party platform is always tough. And the reason is because it might not have been built for that at first, right? And so now the engineers and things like that kind of have to go back and do some things inside the platform, and and that takes a while. But the nice thing about these third-party technologies, for the most part, is that they can connect one way or another through APIs or some other ways. It's still not easy, right? Like, how do you, like, when you think of, Salesforce is kind of the easiest way to think about it is, when, like, I use a company called Higher Logic for my online community platform. And, like you've said, platforms, they do a lot of the same stuff. So, I mean, it's important, but it's not the single most important thing. And I really loved how you mentioned the hearts are but you still to some degree need some of that technology to manage it and stuff like that. And so, that can connect directly to Salesforce and push like the engagement things that you want, like I was looking at this thing the other day to where, and I know I'm getting off a little bit, but my assumption is Bevy can do some of these things too into your platform and or into your CRM and things like that to bring engagement numbers into Salesforce to where now you can create this dashboard into Salesforce or in your product or whatever, so people can see at the end of the day, these people are engaging, these people aren't, these are the things that we're doing, these are the people we need to go with because of our super user program. We now have more insights and things like that. Now others can have access to that information so that you don't have to do all these presentations internally to always tell CSMs and everybody else to, so at the end of the day, if you can make your life easier, the better. And I like that. So
all about the dashboards.
It's always about the dashboards.
Chris, you've talked to a lot of community builders, and I'm wondering, is there someone that you've talked to that you felt really had this part figured out when it came on these online, offline ROI measuring? Was there someone that really stood out for you?
Yeah, I think a few folks kind of stand out. This guy, Scott Wilder, he's been a leader in the community space for a long time. He's actually going to be on Peers Over Beers later today again. So he's been on Peers Over Beers, super smart dude. He doesn't have it all figured out, but none of us do. But he's done some really cool things in the past and into the future at the companies at now. So I think he would be a good person to talk to. I think that, when you look at folks like Nicole Saunders from Zendesk, so she's the director of community there. She has, user groups. She has an online community. She has those things and other things that, operate. She has an operational person that kind of builds those dashboards and things like that. So that's a person to talk to.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds like a dream come true.
It takes time. I mean, she has a team of 4 or 5 people, right? And over time she can start. I mean, she started all the way from just her, and so over time she's starting to build a team that has those people. And I think the key is that you can't do this alone. So at the very least, you have to find somebody in the organization to partner with to help you do that, right? So like to me, when I start looking at that, so I now report into the CMO directly, so the Chief Marketing Officer. And so the nice thing about them or about that team is that they have this really, the nice thing about digital, when you think of like, the main website, you need data, and they're always connecting systems together to get the data and all this stuff. So we have a guy that does all that, and I'm trying to get on his radar, which he knows it. He knows me well, but to help build some of those things. And there's this other operational guy within marketing that I'm partnering with to slowly but surely push in. Like I do a ton of virtual events that go deep inside our product, show people certain things. And so when people register for an event, that goes directly into Marketo, but that then goes into Salesforce to now start looking at, and it's just fairly new, start looking at when an active customer uses the product, or is there kind of similarities, or is there something there to say they're buying more because they or community influenced a potential upsell, cross-sell, or renewal? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then are we getting leads directly from the community itself, from the events that I'm doing and stuff like that? So I'm starting to do some of that, but I think that it's slow going because they have other priorities, and I don't have a full-time person to do that. So
yes, that's always it feels to me that fight is always we don't have the data, therefore it becomes hard to prove the business value. But because we don't have the business value, then we're never in the priority list, and there's always something that is easier to measure that gets prioritized faster. So that's I believe everyone's struggle with community.
Yeah, and I think and I don't have all the answers, but I do think you just got to continue to push, and at the end of the day, I heard one CEO say, look, I just know it's valuable. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, show some value and things like that, but there's just some things you can't track. You can't track every little thing. I'm not saying you shouldn't track things and try to get to a perfect place. Like when you look at some of these support communities, they're tracking, case deflection or call deflection, whatever you want to call it. And that's hard enough. It's funny because you start talking to some of these community managers that are a little bit young and they're like, oh, used to case deflection was a thing. It's actually a really big opportunity there. So I wouldn't call it just a thing. I would say that's a huge ROI. You start building the community around that at first. I'm talking probably like it's a little different community there, but point is like that piece is tough. And if you just keep working at it, it will take years. Maybe you'll never get there, but it is important, because here's what happens, and is your leaders sometimes leave, right? And you're there to then kind of say, what is the value? Then you got people that don't understand community, and then you're like, what is the value again? And if you have the proper ROI, well, here's what we've done last year, here's what we've done the last few months, this is what, boom, boom, boom. They're like, oh, maybe we'll keep this thing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's just the way that life is. 4 or 5 years down the road, you're doing awesome, doing all this stuff. Get a new CEO, get a new leader, and CMO. I don't know, whatever you report into, they want to change everything.
And that's really the cool stuff. So there are a lot of Mindvalley would be probably boxed into the ed tech type of business, and this is the one thing that we're extremely proud about. There are not many ed tech companies out there that get 1,000 people to fly into a city to be together for 3 weeks. I think we're kind of the only one who's managed to get something crazy like
awesome.
this together. And we know for a fact that community is our competitive advantage. It's just it's the loyalty that gets created with the brand. It's something that it's incredibly hard to measure, as you said. How do you measure your customers' shine in their eyes when they walk out of the event? You don't. It's you can have NPS, you can see how many of them were returners, you can see how many of them, I don't know.
But the emotional part is hard to capture.
But you cannot. And that's what makes them stay. It is really seeing how their eyes are shining at the end of an event that makes them have a bond to Mindvalley that they cannot compare to any other company out there. That's really, to me, whenever I think about this, as you said, we all know, because I don't think Coursera or Udemy can claim that they're bringing together 1,000 people for 3 weeks to live together and experience life together. That's quite a bold claim on our side, even though they're incredible companies that we often look up to when it comes to what they're doing in the industry. But community is the one thing that, to me, it really sets us apart.
I think that it's hard to capture the emotion. I agree, but with video out there and writing certain things, case studies, or quotes, it seems like a fairly easy thing to do, especially after they come off that high. You capture like right after the last day. Hey, look, 20 people line up. Quote here, quote there, video here, video there. You know what I mean? Like,
this is one
during
of the
activity.
things
So
I didn't mention, actually, Chris, but a big part of community value for the company, I didn't mention about this. We have something that is called the Stories platform, where we gather the stories of transformation, or also known as testimonials. We have 15,000 of them.
So you're not lacking any. That's awesome. I love it.
So we have literally a person who is called the tribe storyteller, and her role is to be able to go. I know. We come up with some interesting names, so the tribe storyteller. But 15,000 people sharing, this is how my life has transformed since Mindvalley. That's talk about advocacy with your customers as a business value that can come out of community. obviously marketing loves all of the stories.
Yes.
And what's really cool is because the volume is so high. Imagine that, for example, you're in the US, and when you go into our website, you see transformation stories that come from the US exclusively. And
Yep.
for me, I see other Italians who are living in Estonia talking about how Mindvalley has changed their lives. So again, there are many things that we can measure when it comes to how powerful this community building is from a business perspective. It's just the thing that I found the hardest is isolating that this is exclusively because of community.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
tough. Well,
Yeah.
just, there's one, I don't know if you know who Rich Mullington is.
Yeah, I love Rich.
Yeah.
Is like my go-to person for community.
He's great.
Everything I've learned about data-driven community management, I owe it to Rich. So absolutely.
So he
Yes.
has this case study out there, which, is kind of dangerous, but this company was willing to turn off, in this case, SEO, because it was an online community. So, and to where when people search, they couldn't find what they were looking for from the community. Now, you still had people that knew to go to the community, so that never changed. But a bulk of that traffic came directly from SEO or Google search, and so and it's important because they turned it off for, I think it was 6 months, and the cases went up and everything else, and so there was a direct link to value of community whenever SEO was turned on to when it was turned off, to where cases went skyrocket up and everything else. He never could tell me who it was, but that case study was phenomenal. And and they can tie ROI, they could tie dollars to it and everything else. So the question is, what happens when you turn off community, right? I'm not saying to do that because it'll be a tough one, but if you turned it off, if you just think about turning it off and you kind of present that thing, well, what if we turned it off? What do you think? What do you think would happen if we turned off community? So no more case studies, no more trips, no more people talking to each other. So I think when you put it in perspective at the end of the day, and then have those testimonials, those are really a good thing. And I think that let's just keep that in mind, especially what you've built there is phenomenal from what I can tell and from what you've said. And I'm amazed, and I want to go on one of these trips.
Yeah, I mean, we have 2 coming up soon. So we're gonna go to Jordan in May, and then we are repeating the experience in Estonia in July. So there are 2 big events coming up. And the other thing, Chris, was in the story that in the history of me in Mindvalley.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've seen contribute very positively in terms of business value was community being mentioned many times in our NPS scores as a positive, even 2 or 3 points extra in NPS exclusively due to community. Because actually, when you look at transformation, there are some very strong studies on how do you deliver transformation through content experiences.
Yeah.
And there are 5 elements. And they're very academic, like a critical reflection and et cetera, there are 5 of them, but the number 3 is called social discourse. And it basically, if you want to deliver a transformative experience to your customers, there has to be a space where they're sharing their experiences, and that is what social discourse is about. So luckily for me, in a way, we're in the business of transformation. We know through academical studies that it is impossible to deliver transformation unless you include social discourse into that. And that requires sharing among peers that are undertaking the same journey. So even though there is no number attached, at least we have big academics saying that this works for what you guys want to do for your brand promise. You got to do community.
Love it. This has been really great. Really appreciate you coming on today, and you've got me inspired. I asked about the events because I'm thinking about, so not to bring this back around to me, but I was thinking about that too. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit more, to kind of think about how I want to structure. My CEO said this to me yesterday. It was literally yesterday, and so it's got me thinking a lot. And this is timely conversation for me personally, and work-wise. He said, so yesterday I had this Ask Me Anything as a virtual event, and it was with our CTO and founder, not our CEO, but our CTO and founder. And I think we had 110 people on which to me was pretty good, but a little over half of those were employees, and the rest, 50 or 60, were customers, partners, and prospects, that kind of stuff. I thought, oh, that's pretty good. He said, well, and my CEO goes, I see it different. It's like, and he goes, I think events and community-driven events should be bringing non-employees. We should be bringing thousands, literally thousands a year of people to events. Thousands. We should have hundreds of events that allows us to bring these thousands of people here. And it wasn't a direct kind of thing to me. It was a direct thing to me because he believes I'm the guy to lead it. But it's to the organization to say, these events, these kind of connections, it could be on site, could be virtual. We need more. We need to do more. We need to bring more people to start building that brand equity, building that brand kind of awareness, and things like that. And that's what you guys have done, which I think is phenomenal. I mean, you've done an amazing job, and thank you for sharing today.
Thank you, Chris. And I really have to actually acknowledge that a lot of this work was initiated and happened for many years exclusively run by our events team. Yeah. So community was born after in Mindvalley as a department, but events team was already on it for almost half a decade by the time community was born, and bringing this magic together. So a lot of what we have learned when it comes to that was driven by our events team, learning how to deliver magic. Yeah. It's quite an interesting formula, and I hope you guys will figure out your own at Peers Over Beers. How do you deliver your own magic formula when you bring people together?
Yeah, this is great. Well, Harry, thanks so much for coming on Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel, and
thank you, Chris, and I'm Annie Selfo.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon, Dan.
Me too.